Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and a very warm welcome to the latest in our series of Doha debates, coming to you from the Gulf state of Qatar and sponsored by the Qatar Foundation. Back in October 2001, it seemed to Britain and America like a perfect plan. Bomb al-Qaeda out of Afghanistan, end the drug trafficking, and help to install and support a new democratic government. But it didn't work out that way. Nearly 9 years later, Western forces are bogged down in an increasingly bitter war with the Taliban. Democratic elections have been tainted by widespread fraud. The narcotics trade and corruption have proved endemic. Now, many voices in the West are expressing the view contained in our motion tonight. This House believes this Afghan government is not worth fighting for. But what do you think? Our panel brings a high level of expertise from inside and outside Afghanistan. Speaking for the motion, Peter Galbraith, a former UN envoy to Afghanistan, who says the UN covered up election fraud in the country. Alongside him, Mirwais Yasini, first Deputy Speaker of the lower house of the Afghan Parliament. Last year, he ran a brief and unsuccessful campaign for the presidency. Against the motion, Shukria Barakzai, one of only a handful of female members of the Afghan Parliament and a prominent women's rights campaigner. And with her, Lawrence Korb, defense analyst and former Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel. So now let me call first on Peter Galbraith to speak for the motion, please.
Thank you. President Hamid Karzai has been in office in Afghanistan for 8 years. And those 8 years have been characterized by ineffectiveness, toleration of corruption, a deteriorating security situation. And this year, he begins a new term in office as a result of an election that was massively fraudulent. Of the 3 million votes that were cast for Hamid Karzai in the last election, EU monitors say that at least 1 million were phony. Based on my experience with the United Nations, monitoring and supporting the elections, we noted that in parts of the country, including Kandahar, the second largest province, fewer than 10% of the people actually voted, while returns were reported in the range of 30% for Kandahar city, up to over 100% in some of the outlying districts. Now, a government that is corrupt, ineffective, that cannot manage the security situation is one that does not merit support. One that is in office by fraud is one that does not merit support. But my argument does not depend on the rights or wrongs of the Karzai administration. Rather, it depends on the prospects for success. The United States and its allies are engaged in a counterinsurgency campaign in Afghanistan. For that counterinsurgency campaign to work, the United States and its allies need a credible local partner. When US and allied troops go into a district, it can clear the district of the Taliban. But then it needs Afghan army to provide security, Afghan police to provide law and order, and most importantly, an Afghan government that can provide honest administration, public services, and that can win the support of the people.
Peter Galbraith, thank you very much indeed. The logic of your position seems to be that you want the troops to leave until there's a government that is more acceptable to NATO. Is that right?
No, but I don't believe that sending additional troops makes sense. Remember, troops...
But you want them to keep fighting, the troops that are there.
I think there are things that can be done in parts of the country that to keep the situation from getting even worse.
But by staying and fighting, they're supporting the remit of the Karzai government, aren't they? They're reinforcing the remit of that government.
No, I think, and this motion, I think it's very important. This motion is not saying that Afghanistan is not worth fighting for.
No.
The motion is that this House believes that the Karzai government, is not worth fighting for. But there is no other government.
Well,
and in those circumstances, additional troops, as part of a counterinsurgency strategy, which involves having a credible local partner, cannot accomplish their mission.
But this is the government, however ineffective, however corrupt, however it fails to meet your expectations or the expectations of the West, it's the one they voted for, albeit there was massive fraud. But President Karzai would have won anyway, wouldn't he, even if there hadn't been fraud?
Tim, you cannot say that a government that is in office by massive fraud is a legitimate government. And this is not an issue.
Would he have lost the election?
This is not
Would he have lost the election?
Possibly. We don't know. What we know is that the election commission that he appointed helped perpetrate a fraud in which there were at least 1 million phony ballots.
But what do you expect in a country which has gone through what Afghanistan... It's hard enough to get a fair election in the United States,
This is condescending toward the people of Afghanistan. That people of Afghanistan are capable of holding elections, and in fact, parts of the campaign, of the election campaign, were very impressive. What I'm opposed to is a military mission that cannot be achieved. Remember, these are young men and women that are putting their lives at risk. This is an enterprise that is costing tens of billions of dollars. And if the mission cannot be accomplished because there isn't a credible partner, because the partner is seen as illegitimate, not just internationally, but by a large segment of the Afghan people.
Peter Galbraith, thank you very much indeed. Could I ask now, please, Shukria Barakzai to speak against the motion?
Thank you very much. Good evening. Thanks God that the legitimacy of Afghan government is not coming from the address of Mr. Peter Galbraith, a former Deputy Envoy from the United Nations for Afghanistan. It's coming from the Afghan vote. It's coming from the Afghan population. It's coming with the international identity, which is they sent the congratulation messages for the Afghan people and Afghan president. At the meantime, he is legitimate. Not only once, 3 times President Karzai got legitimacy. Number one, when it was during the 8 years, as you mentioned, when it was a temporary Loy-Jirga, he got vote. The second time, first presidential election, which is Afghans practicing democracy. And the second was the second election, which is everybody just only talking about the fraud on election. You will never understand how it's difficult for Afghans to pay their own life for practicing democracy with the name of election. There was a lot of casualties among our police, among our civilians, and there are lots of people putting their own life in risk to succeed these procedures. At the meantime, the government, when you say and blame that they failed, they are not successful, and they are corrupt. Over the 5 million refugees right now, over the 5 million, 3 million are in Afghanistan right now, which is they come from Iran and Pakistan, Afghans living abroad. Today we have 7 million children which is going to the school. From 2002, we have 0 police, 0 number of national police and national army. But today, just only the number of our police is 160,000 with a uniform, with a responsibility. We are a young government to doing lots of job in once, state building, nation building, counter narcotics, counter corruption, and having or making a government.
Could you come to a close, please?
Don't forget that the part of the government was complete, in fact, 4 years before.
Thank you very much indeed.